In the beginning of the run, when they first started this show, he used to play that awesome wow as sort of like a Valley Girl moments, right? So it was sort of like awesome wow, awesome wow, awesome wow. Hello everyone, Mark Daniel Patrick here, musical theater coach. Thank you so much for taking time to check out the channel. Don't forget you can join our Patreon page by clicking the link below, subscribe to this video, and turn on notifications so you'll never miss an upcoming video. Disney Plus almost broke the internet this summer by giving us theater fans something to rewatch 1,000 times over during this pandemic. Now, back in July, we took a look at one of everyone's favorite performances from this show as Jonathan Groff's turn in You'll Be Back. But thankfully, the King has 2 more performances in this show before the curtain falls, so why not go take a look at those as well? Performing What Comes Next from the hit musical Hamilton, this is Jonathan Groff.
They say the price of my war's not a price that they're willing to pay. Insane! You cheat with the French, now I'm fighting with France and with Spain.
Now, of course, the first time he's on stage with his performance of You'll Be Back, that's the most impactful moment he has for the audience. It's the first chance he has to set his foot forward and put his sort of mark on this show and say, this is what I'm going to deliver. So what did we talk about in the first video? We talked about a couple of things. His death glare towards the audience, his rage and his manic behavior at times, and also the spitting, right? That's obviously something he really wants to have part of his character. And in the first video, you could make a 50-50 argument of whether that's intentional or whether that's just Jonathan being Jonathan on stage. And I think each side has its own points and could win either way. As you move in now into this performance, I think it's pretty clear that he wants that to be part of his character. He's making sure that, I mean, he's been on stage for 10 seconds here. You wouldn't have built up that much saliva already in your mouth just coming on stage 15 seconds prior. I think he really wants that to come through and obviously makes it for such an impactful moment. And that's totally fine. I actually quite love it. If anything, it's giving your audience something to talk about. It's giving room for your audience to sort of fill in the gaps and fill in the blanks of, he's doing this and he keeps doing it, but why is he doing it? And it creates conversation, and if anything, it's drawing your audience into your character even more. So it really lets you in that you're on the right track with your character.
I'm so blue. I thought that we made an arrangement when you went away. You were mine to subdue.
Okay, so now even something as simple as this color change he gets here, it's dumb slapstick humor, but it does inform of how much your character is really in charge. So we talked about in the first video how the King is really allowed to play with the fourth wall. He comes in and out of it kind of as he performs through his different numbers. It's really to give a reprieve for the audience so that they have something different and they can get a sense of what's happening across the pond with the King. So even the fact that the guy in the lighting booth is under your control is really quite genius, and you can play it a number of different ways. So this could either signify that he's losing his control over America and now he has to demand that the light change for him, or he just has that much power that he can demand anything he wants and it's just brought for him. But in terms of your character, Jonathan now needs to make a decision of what that signifies. What does that mean? Does it actually mean he's losing his power, or does it mean he has that much power to demand anything he wants? The reason why I say all that is because he needs to make the decision and play that through his character. Whether or not the audience interprets it that way, it can be interpreted in many different ways, and the audience can take it how they want, but he needs to make the decision in his head of how he sees it and play that.
Well, even despite our estrangement, I've got a small query for you. What comes next?
Oh, I love it. I love that moment so much. We talked about this yesterday, about taking your time with a song. Once the song starts, it's not a sprint to the finish. Take your time where you need to. And this is beautiful. I mean, his music director would have given him bars of space if he wants to hold on to that for as long as he wants to create that moment. I love the way he plays this moment because it really feels like all of a sudden, as he says that, I've got a small query for you, and drags that out, it really feels like he as the king has just blanked. It really feels like the king all of a sudden doesn't really know what to say next. So you can use that to really create a fun moment for your character. So the line is, I've got a small query for you, hold, and now you're thinking to yourself, well, what comes next? What comes next, right? So you're allowing your character to lose himself and kind of go a little off and just forget what he's saying. And as he's thinking to himself, what was I going to say next? He all of a sudden clicks for him and say, no, that's the line. What comes next? What are you going to do now, right? So it's a tiny thing. It's only a couple of notes there of space you have to create all this at the same time, but it's incredibly effective to get you on to the next note and push your character into the next part of the song.
You've been freed. Do you know how hard it is to lead? You're on your own. Awesome. Wow. Do you have a clue what happens now?
Okay, so there's another one right there. What's the line? Awesome. Wow. And he's played that line a couple of different ways every single time he's done this show. But in the beginning of the run, when they first started this show, he used to play that awesome wow as sort of like a Valley Girl moments, right? So it was sort of like awesome wow, right? It was very, very played up. This one here is very muted and subtle, and to me it's a little bit of a throwaway. I don't know if because he's coming back into the role just to do this film, I don't know if that's why he decided to change it. But the muted, subtle read on that line is really not my favorite. I'd rather him do something a little bit different with it. And by doing that, you allow yourself to add a little bit more complexity to this character and to this role. Don't get me wrong, I love Jonathan Groff and I love what he's doing with this, and it's very, very effective. You could also, though, add a little bit more depth and a little bit more complexity and just play with the character a little bit. You know, for me, it's all one note. For me, it's very comic relief from start to finish. You can use that to create a little moment for yourself and a little moment for the king where he starts to look inward and starts to doubt himself a little bit because all of this has happened to him. With the Americans leaving, the revolution, all of this has been taken away from him, and that's the only reason we see him in this show is because he's a little, you know, almost childish about it, complaining that the Americans or that the revolution has left him and his empire's starting to fall. So the line is, you're on your own. Awesome. Wow. Do you have a clue what happens now? So I love the way he played it originally with the whole Valley Girl moment because it gives you a high and then you could come down to a low. You can use that to bring everything internal and make it a little bit more personal for the king, right? So you're on your own. Awesome. Wow. All of a sudden he starts to think, do you have a clue what happens now? Because that's for them, but it's also for you. As his empire starts to crumble around him, what is he going to do? What is he feeling about this? How is he going to react to all of it? And I think that needs to show a little bit here. It can't all just be the one comic note. I think we do need a little bit more depth of, oh God, now what am I going to do, right? So that line of, do you have a clue what happens now? Oceans rise, empires fall. It's much harder when it's all your call. It's all of that he's talking about himself because he's gone through it as the Americans start to leave him and the revolution starts to gain its independence. So there's those little things that you need to add into your character to create a little bit more depth. They're small things, don't get me wrong. But instead of just playing the one comedic note the whole way through, it's little things that add a little nuance to your character to allow the audience to know that, you know, you really have a grasp on what your character's experiencing.
Oceans rise, empires fall. It's much harder when it's all your call. All alone across the sea.
See, now that right, that across the sea. So the biggest thing for John here is he needs to understand, or he needs to decide how he wants to portray his character. When you're developing a character, you want to be able to consider a couple of different things. So number one is, how do you see yourself? Number two is, how do other people see you? And the third one could be how you want other people to see you, right? All of us, you know, we meet different people in our lives and you act a certain way to try and elicit a certain response from those people because you want them to see you in a certain light. If you want someone to see you as more popular, or you want someone to see you as more attractive, you're doing different things to try and elicit that response from them. So the show covers a lot of ground in history here, and maybe your character is going to change. change. Maybe your character is going to adapt to everything that's happening around him, or maybe he's going to react differently to what's happening around him. You need to be able to make those choices, and every time you come up on stage, which is only 3 times in the entire show, you need to be able to show that there's a bit of a shift in your character. So that's the beauty and the detriment of this role, is that he only gets 3 chances to come out, and for number 1, it's a good thing because the audience isn't going to tire of you. The audience is they understand what you're about, and it's kind of a relief that you're on stage for them. And the detriment of that is you only have 3 chances to really come out and impact the show and leave a lasting impression on the audience.
Da, da, ya, da. You're on your own.
And that's another thing right there of playing with timing, right? So again, his music director would have given him all the space in the world he needs to create that moment for himself. It's a great ending to it. I quite love it. I quite love the way he approaches this role as a whole. But I will say there are spaces for a little bit more deeper connections to your character. To change the perspective so it's not all outward anger, that you can turn it and look internal a couple times. The king can, sort of turn it on himself and maybe have some internal struggle. We don't get a lot of that in these first 2 performances, but it will, like I said, we'll take a look at the 3rd performance in a couple of weeks and see if it has any changes or any shifts or impacts on his character. Okay, that's all the time we have for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to leave a comment of what you thought of this video and what you'd like to see in the future. Until next time, I'm Mark Daniel Patrick, and thanks so much for watching.